You're listening to Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, here's a question for you. Is the West on the brink of an all-out war? World War III, in fact. Well, that's the view of one top NATO official who has said that civilians in the West must prepare for conflict with Russia within 20 years. Admiral Rob Bauer warned that large numbers of civilians will need to be mobilised as and when war breaks out, and governments should put systems in place to streamline that process. Well, is that true? Or a load of old scaremongering? Well, to discuss that, I'm now joined by former NATO commander, Rear Admiral Chris Parry. Welcome to the show, Chris. Always a pleasure. So, strong words here from Admiral Rob Bauer, Dutch naval officer and the chairman of NATO's military committee, saying it's not a given that we're at peace and we must prepare for conflict within 20 years with Russia. Is that true, or is he scaremongering?
Martin, we need to prepare for war with Russia now. We've got a situation where we've got an aggressive totalitarian regime that has invaded Ukraine. It's making threatening noises about the Baltic states, Sweden and Finland, for daring to join NATO recently. And if we don't mobilize our population and get our logistics sorted out, we could find ourselves at war with Russia within a year. I don't think it's 20 years. The other thing is we're facing a totalitarian bloc at the moment of Russia, China, Iran and North Korea, who are supplying each other. They're supporting each other militarily. They're regularly exercising. And if we don't wake up in the free world, we're going to find ourselves on the receiving end of some very serious military operations.
But the trouble with that, Chris, is we have no armed forces worth talking about anywhere, or at least they're severely depleted. The army has gone down from 82,000 to 73,000. That's the smallest size since the Napoleonic era. The RAF has just 169 fighter planes, a 50% cut since the Conservatives took office. The RAF is now smaller than at any time since its creation after the First World War. And as for the concept of mobilising the British public, most of them would probably complain that being forced to conscript was a hate crime.
Yeah, we've got a problem at the moment. I'm afraid to say that successive governments, certainly during the time I was in the service and since, have been treating the armed forces a bit like a militarized bureaucracy. They've just been going through the motions. They haven't been concentrating on capability. They've been distracted by all sorts of social issues. And I'm afraid to say we've been complacent, sitting under the protection of the United States. And we've got to get real, I'm afraid. We are back in the 1930s. We are facing fascist and communist regimes who wish to do us harm. And it's on the scale of Hitler and Stalin and Mao Zedong again. And I'm afraid to say, until we see missiles landing in Kent rather than in Kiev, people aren't going to get the message. And I think the need to get back to national service is a very real possibility for a lot of European countries.
Well, and Chris, of course, you mentioned America there, and we have a big election coming up in November, and there's a very real prospect that Donald Trump could win his second term as president. Trump has been very open about the fact he's no particular fan of NATO. He thinks that America puts too much money in and that Europe doesn't put its weight. Is a part of NATO's position today sort of waving a flag saying, hey, we're still here, we're important, and they're concerned, actually, about what it might mean if Trump gets in?
There's no doubt that NATO is the cornerstone of the freedom of the free world, but it's broader than that now. We've got to take in other countries like Japan, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, and I think India will come towards us in future. This is more than about NATO. It's about American leadership of the free world, which I don't think Trump is going to abdicate, to tell you the truth. He is trying to say to the Europeans, look, we've spent 75% of what we spend on defence on NATO. And when you consider that really to get Europe up to the same capability conventionally to face Russia would take about 400 billion. Well, you know, everybody needs to know that the American annual defense budget is 810 billion. So when we say, oh, we really can't afford it, we've got other things to spend it on, every American thinks, well, we're defending you and we are not building hospitals, we're not building schools and other social programs to defend Europe. And if you can't pull your weight, we're not going to come and help you. The way I've described it in the past is that normally we form a coalition. America's the sheriff, we're the deputies, we go off and do the job, and we come back again for tea and medals. Now, what America is saying is, if you don't actually invest in your own defense, we're not going to send the cavalry to help you. And that's the real message for Europe now. You've got to start thinking you might want to defend yourself.
Chris, do you think we're fit to go to war, not only in terms of depleted craft? We have aircraft carriers sat idle in Portsmouth at a time when we're on the verge of war in the Red Sea, and the state of the nation. Will we even get through the medicals? We're overweight, we're tattooed, and recruitment this week saying we simply cannot get the staff.
Yeah, it's time to do something about it. I'm afraid to say a range of social programs have deterred the sort of people who would want to join the armed forces. You know, when I joined a long time ago now, you didn't join for the money, you didn't join for the conditions, you joined because you wanted to serve your country and actually do things, for the people you believed in. And I'm afraid to say that, as I said, a range of social programs has deterred that sort of attitude. It's very transactional now. What do I get out of it? What can I do after I leave the armed forces? We've got to get a sense of duty, a sense of sacrifice, and a sense of selflessness back into the way we do our business.
OK, thank you very much, former NATO Commander Rear Admiral Chris Parry, for that. What do you think out there? Could we even get an army together? Seems most people want to sit around, play video games or have a McDonald's, and they're turning them away because they're tattooed. Well, most young lads are now.